It's like my old home church. Nobody sits on the front row. It's 2025. The Daily Wire is about to turn 10 years old. And yesterday, the President of the United States signed an executive order titled Protecting Our Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation, which prohibits surgical and chemical mutilation of our children. It is a great day for the Daily Wire. This order comes on the heels of other critical actions taken by President Trump in just his first week in office, which affirmed that the federal government will reform its practices to recognize the scientific and moral reality that there are only two genders, male and female. These actions should bring an immediate and dramatic end to what's been a true period of national disgrace, which I think will be remembered as no less evil than slavery or abortion. And Donald Trump deserves enormous credit for righting this terrible national wrong. For me personally, though, this is also an exciting moment to reflect on what we've accomplished as a company. There are a lot of people in the conservative movement who deserve a lot of credit for this victory, but a lot of the people who deserve the most credit are sitting right here in this room today. We don't often get to tout all of our own accomplishments, modesty being a virtue, but false modesty is a sin. And to put it bluntly, the Daily Wire has been leading on this issue from the very day that we were founded. I couldn't be more proud of all of our enormous contributions to this issue. We've made enormous contributions to a range of issues, and I'm often proud of the team, but never more so than today. It is rare in life. I've been in this business for a minute. I've seen a lot of things. It is rare in this life that you get to be a part of a moment like this, and it would be inappropriate for us not to take a moment to reflect on it together as a team and to reflect on it with our audience, with the people who've supported us, with the people who've empowered us by listening to our shows, by sharing our content, by engaging with our advertisers who actually did the advertising, our subscribers who made it possible for us to take some of the stands that we've taken against incredible odds. I don't think people, sometimes even inside the company and certainly outside, actually realize just how difficult it has been to wage this particular fight and what it means that we've been able to participate in this victory. It's a very special thing. We should hold on to it. Like with all of your successes in life, you should hang on to it loosely, but you should hang on to it nonetheless. Nobody has fought harder than we have on this issue. And for that reason, I've never been more proud. And I want to tell you a little bit, just in reflection on how we came to be in this moment. 2 weeks after the founding of the company, Ben Shapiro went on CNN and did a show with Dr. Drew and Zoe Tur. And for those of you who don't remember, Zoe Tur is a biological man who, it's hard to remember him because he's basically disappeared from public life. But he's a biological man who at that time was defending so-called trans rights, which were fairly novel at the time. Most of us had not really engaged with this issue in a major way. And yet there was Ben, 2015, I can't stress enough, 2 weeks after we started the Daily Wire, and he was debating these issues, and he referred to Tur as Sir, which in retrospect was perhaps a little bit more polite than Ben should have been. Tur, though, responded to this by grabbing Ben by the neck and saying, "If you say that again, you're going home in an ambulance." It was an amazing moment of television. I mean, here you had a rather large biological man in a dress threatening physical violence if Ben didn't bend the knee to this obvious delusion. And what was the reaction from CNN? Nothing. What was the reaction from Dr. Drew while one of his guests was being threatened on national television for saying a political opinion? Nothing. And that was the first clue that we had as a company as to what this fight was going to be like. It was going to be threats of physical violence, threats of economic hardship, threats of demonetization, of blocking, of harassment, of threats against essentially the livelihood of everyone who worked for this company and our opportunities at success at every turn if we did not accept this obvious lie. So from day one, it was the Daily Wire's policy not to give into this. From day one, it was our policy not to use the ridiculous novel concept of preferred pronouns in any of our reporting. And we decided instead we would just use pronouns in our reporting like reporters had been doing since the dawn of time. But at the time, well, in retrospect, you're like, well, that's not a very big deal, except that At the time, everybody was moving as quickly as they could to rewrite the rules of language to accommodate for this gender madness. Back then in 2015, we only had two hosts, Ben and Drew. At that time, I'm not even sure that we had hired Michael Knowles to be our social media manager, which was the worst decision that we ever made in the history of the company. We eventually had to give him a show just because he was so bad at his job. But even with only two hosts, this issue was never far away from our coverage. I remember Ben talking about it on his 20th episode. I remember Drew talking about it in the first month of the company and giving one of his first comedic monologues about men going into women's restrooms. And you should go back and watch it. It's absolutely vintage, classic Andrew Klavan. And again, at the time, no one was having these conversations. No one was engaging in this fight. Now, of course, it's universal. And in retrospect, it feels like these were just very small moves that were happening, but they were pronounced moves at the time. In fact, many right-of-center commentators and journalists at that time, even many who now are on the correct side of the issue, who now have done heroic work since having the scales lifted from their eyes. Nevertheless, in those days, they were not on our side. They were supportive of, again, I call them so-called trans rights, because I'm not sure that there is a right to mutilate your body in service of a delusion. And there's certainly not a right to mutilate children in service of a delusion. We weren't the only people in the fight, and I don't mean to imply that we were, but it was lonely. There were not many, and we were leading. And our outspokenness on the issue came with a very real price. The truth is, we couldn't have imagined how great a price it would ultimately be, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as we go through today, but we were warned. In 2019, as the company was really starting to get its sea legs, we were really starting to break through, we were really starting to have success. We were being courted by one of the big three Hollywood talent agencies. And an agent at one of these, a top agent at one of these top agencies with whom I've cultivated a friendship. I think he's a good guy. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want him to take a lot of flack for this. Nevertheless, he called me and he said, listen, we love you guys. We think that there's huge opportunity. There are a lot of great deals to be done, but, you know, you're conservatives and we're, as an organization, pretty well populated by left-leaning Hollywood folk. I said, yeah, but you knew that when you were taking the meetings with us. Are we going to be able to do deals or not? And he said, you were 100% going to be able to do deals. We're going to do huge deals. We're going to make a lot of money together. We're going to help you guys increase your reach, increase your effectiveness. And the truth is, we don't really care what you guys talk about. You want to talk about abortion, that's fine. You want to talk about small government, that's fine. Robust foreign policy, that's fine. We understand. But there is one thing. You have got to stop talking about this trans issue. You have to understand, he told me, a lot of the people you'll be working with at the agency, I mean, this is LA, this is New York. A lot of the people you're working with at the agency have transgendered children. It's personal to them. You have to let it go. The or else was kind of implied. He didn't actually say it. And again, the guy who said this, a good guy, he wasn't actually trying to threaten me. He was trying to tell me the actual reality of the situation. But it really was a devil at the crossroads moment for Ben and I mean, essentially, we were being told, you can have the world and it will only cost you your soul. And we wanted the world. You know, if you work here, you know, if you've been following the company, if you're a supporter of the company, we are remarkably ambitious. We're the most ambitious people in conservative media. We don't just want to be the preeminent conservative media company. We want to be the preeminent digital media company in the world. That's what we have our sights on. The most influence, the largest and most engaged audience, the most opportunity to make a difference, the most opportunity to do well and to do good. And here we were being told, well, the cost of that is you cannot talk about this issue. And we chose our souls. Again, you look back and you say the Daily Wire did over $200 million of revenue last year. We have millions of people in our audience. We have enormous reach. We have successful hosts and successful shows and successful movies, successful documentaries. And it seems like that was an easy decision to make. It was not an easy decision to make. In fact, if we had known just how hard it's going to be, I don't know if we could have had the fortitude to have stood by the decision. Fortunately, God has special providence for fools, and we were very naive. So in the years that followed, we doubled down and we tripled down on this particular fight. We led on this particular fight, and we scored real victories, both political and cultural. In 2021, our own Luke Rosiak blew open one of the most consequential news stories of the decade. And I say consequential because it literally elected a governor in the state of Virginia. In Loudoun County, Virginia, a school board had covered up a sexual assault in order to protect the insane bathroom policy that they had put in place, which had allowed a teenage boy to go into the restroom with teenage girls. After the story blew up, Matt Walsh rented a room in Loudoun County in order to qualify as a citizen for a citizens-only school board meeting and helped bring the issue to national attention. It went viral and led in significant part to the election of Governor Youngkin in Virginia, which is a huge turning point for the state of Virginia and the beginning of what became a cascading turning point around this issue and around our politics nationwide. And of course, the school officials responsible for the travesty were later indicted for their roles in the cover-up. That is because of the work of Luke Rosiak, is because of the work of Matt Walsh, it is because of the work of the Daily Wire, from our journalists all the way through our social media team for making that happen. And in many ways, it was the springboard for Matt's journey, becoming himself a leader on this issue, the leading voice at the leading publication on the defining social issue of the last decade. Again, a thing for which we should be enormously proud and thankful to have been a part of. After that, Matt released his children's book, Johnny the Walrus, and cleverly became the #1 author in the LGBT category on Amazon. It was a hilarious stunt, and the book was very, very funny and very good. I'll brag a little bit that my niece illustrated the book. So obviously this was a great moment for me in the history of the company, but it was also effective because it changed policy at Amazon. Outraged Amazon employees staged a die-in. They were so scandalized by the fact that we were able to sell some books about ideas with which they disagreed, that they pretended to be dead at the doorway of Amazon to imply that reading our words in a children's book was the threat of actual violence. It threatened their actual lives. And Amazon, one of the largest and most valuable companies in the world, had to make a choice. Would they stand with their employees? And probably, if we're being honest, based on the geography of where they were founded, probably their own sort of political beliefs, whether they deeply held a belief in transgenderism at the top of the company or not, who knows? But certainly they were friendly to the idea of progressive values. And yet, because the Daily Wire was gaining traction, because we were starting to have purchase with the audience, they chose sanity, which was surprising to all of us. They left the book up in their store, and today it's sold over 150,000 copies on Amazon. And that wouldn't be the last time we took a top tech company to task over the issue of transgenderism. Then, of course, in March of 2021, Harry's Razors canceled a big advertising campaign with the Daily Wire because Michael Knowles and Candace Owens had discussed the reality of biological sex on a show that, at the time, wasn't even on the Daily Wire. And once again, we decided to fight rather than simply let the left have the ability to dictate this dilution onto the rest of us by fiat. We launched Jeremy's Razors. And just so you understand, today, Jeremy's Razors is a growing and thriving business. It did something like $20 million of revenue last year, which is a pretty funny end of the joke if you think about it. But it wasn't obvious that that was going to redound to our benefit. We were essentially saying to all of our advertisers on whom we are dependent, and at that time we're dependent for almost all of our revenue. This was before the real ascendancy of our subscription program. And we were telling them, we will not bend the knee to these sorts of threats. We will not bend the knee. We could have lost an overwhelming number of our advertisers, and we could have lost the entire company. We didn't, thank God. But that doesn't mean that we weren't taking that risk. We did take the risk. And we won. A year later, we launched another market opportunity with Jeremy's Chocolate. Hershey's Chocolate thought it would be funny to cater to all this nonsense with a Hershey bar. And we said, no, you can't. We're not going to give in to this sort of diversity cult that you're a part of. We launched our own chocolate. And today we've sold over 1 million bars of our she, her, and he, him chocolate. As I like to say, one of them has nuts. I'll leave it to you to decide which is which. And again, we were telling the marketplace of our advertisers that we weren't going to put up with this. There was enormous risk. Just because the moves worked does not mean there wasn't enormous risk. Success always seems inevitable in retrospect, but success is never guaranteed. Each one of these moves required of us Huge risk, both of capital and of toil and of reputation. And every single time we felt like we were putting the entire company at risk to stand for these particular values. And we felt that way because we were. And the consequences that we had been warned about were very nearly upon us. And of course, the most important and most public move we made came in the form of a question. In 2022, Daily Wire released Matt Walsh's culture-shaping documentary, What is a Woman? The left, it turns out, did not know the answer, and they were pissed. Matt's film became a national sensation with tens of millions of viewers. By the time the dust had settled, we, working together with Matt, had exposed the sinister motives behind body-destroying medical procedures at Vanderbilt Hospital and beyond, hosted a giant rally outside of the Tennessee State House demanding action to protect children, and had started a movement that inspired over 36 states nationwide to change their laws to ban the barbaric practice of mutilating children in the name of radical political theory. Those actions, more than anything else, led to the case that's currently before the Supreme Court to determine whether or not states have an inherent right to protect children from having their bodies sacrificed on the altar of this fashionable social contagion, or whether our government is just a pagan death cult. We will know that this year, and we will know it because of What is a Woman? And What is a Woman wasn't our only film dealing with these issues. In 2023, we put out Lady Ballers, starring virtually all of us, and tackling the issue of men dominating women's sports. The day after we released the trailer, Facebook permanently collapsed our traffic on the platform. You have to understand that there was a time when the Daily Wire was the #1 publisher in the world on Facebook, which was the #1 publisher in the world. The day after we released the Lady Ballers trailer, they crushed us. Mark Zuckerberg has publicly acknowledged now that they were taking actions to suppress effective political and social content, and we were the most engaged provider of that kind of content in the world at the time. We saw an 80% reduction in our traffic and revenue on the platform. There was a time when it was the #1 source of our revenue and the #1 source of our traffic, and it was cut by over 80% as a result of the actions that we've taken around this issue. This single set of changes from this single company has cost the Daily Wire tens, and I'm not exaggerating when I say very probably hundreds of millions of dollars. And it wasn't the only loss because of the trans issue. After Michael Knowles told a crowd at CPAC that transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely, no less an adversary than the Biden White House itself came out to denounce him. YouTube demonetized Matt Walsh's entire channel for discussing the biological sex of Dylan Mulvaney. He's a dude, by the way. In sum, YouTube has demonetized 2,000 videos from Daily Wire since 2020 and declared 194 videos hateful and derogatory just since 2022. The total cost of these enforcements, just from YouTube, against the Daily Wire are likely between $10 and $20 million. The total cost of the additional shadow banning and removing from recommendation engines and inability to retarget the audiences that we weren't able to engage with in the first place, and all the other consequences of our stand on the trans issue are well in excess of $100 million. Just so you know, because big numbers start to sound small when we use them all the time, when you're talking about $100 or $200 million in just 4 years for a company that only did $200 million of revenue this year and the year before, you are talking about the difference between abject success and close the doors and sell off the printer failure. That we have been able to persevere and survive and even thrive against these kinds of attacks, almost all of which were directly because of the trans issue, is nothing short of miraculous. God himself has, for some reason that is beyond my understanding, chosen to allow us to continue to survive when by all right, we should not have been able to because of the attacks we have taken, because of the stand that we've made on the issue of transgenderism. As I said, if that agent back in 2019 had told me what the price was actually going to be, I don't know what I would have said. I probably would have said the same thing because I'm an ornery cuss, and also because I had a lot less to lose back then, which, you know, if he comes along and says the same thing to me now, as I like to say, I'm not very good, but I'm real expensive. You know, It's not that I'm not for sale, it's that no one ever makes an offer. But damn, we had our teeth kicked in over this issue again and again and again and again. I couldn't begin to outline all of the consequences, but here are a few. 206 enforcements from TikTok, who has actually shut down our channels on numerous occasions. We've been dropped by back-end service providers from JW Player to HubSpot to OpenWeb to Aspire. We lost a multi-million-dollar a year email business for almost 2 years because of these and other cancellations. We were blocked by Eventbrite for events related to What is a Woman, by Target for sales of Johnny the Walrus, by Bing, who canceled our ability to even give them our money. They wouldn't let us spend advertising dollars with them because of the trans issue. We were restricted and banned by Twitter, including their blocking of Dr. Jordan Peterson before he ever even joined the Daily Wire. And I think it's worth noting that Dr. Peterson's rise to international prominence largely began with a refusal to buckle on the issue of preferred pronouns. One might say that while the Daily Wire has been a leader on this issue, we have also attracted other people who are willing to fight the fight on this issue to join us. And Dr. Peterson is an obvious example, another leader on the issue who chose to join the Daily Wire. Even conservative media organizations refused to have our talent on their shows at various times because of our rigidity on this issue. Everyone wanted us to just get over it. But we kept fighting. We launched our children's streamer, Bentkey, specifically because of Disney's, quote, not so secret gay agenda of adding queerness into content for little kids. We fought against GARM for trying to enforce their ideology on us at the cost of our ad revenue, and Ben was called to testify on Capitol Hill. We even dropped our HR, they call it HRM, like our HR back-end provider, where you used to all log in and see why your paycheck bounced. One time. But we dropped that entire service because they were requiring us to put pronouns in everyone's profiles. At every single turn, we dropped law firms who required us to identify our pronouns. Every single turn, we made the decision that was worse for business because it was right for our mission. Because this company exists for two reasons. A business reason, yes, and a missional reason also. And there's tension between those two missions. And when in doubt, we choose our values. The fundamental thing that we will be accused of by people who watch this video is, sure, you did all of that, but you did it to make money. You did it to sell books. You did it to sell tickets to your movies. You did it to get traffic on the platforms. What I'm telling you, first of all, is that it's not by accident that the Daily Wire has aligned the profit motive with our missional interests. We did that deliberately because we know how human incentives work. We know that we will be more likely to accomplish our values-based mission if we are also accomplishing a business mission. But I assure you that at every single point at which we made one of these decisions, we thought that it wasn't going to be financially successful. We thought there was a chance. We were taking a bet on the audience. We were putting our faith in the audience. We were assuming that if we felt the way that we felt, surely somebody else felt the way that we felt also. And that maybe if we had the courage of our convictions to stand up when others were not standing up, that maybe that audience would have our back. And yes, that did redound to our benefit, not to the price of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've been denied by company after company, by tech giant after tech giant, and again, sometimes even by other people in the conservative movement. Now, that is, as I've said all along, that is not to say that we were alone in this fight. There were a lot of important voices in the fight: Abigail Shrier and Riley Gaines and Seth Dillon and Haya Rychik and Megyn Kelly. Elon Musk spent $44 billion to restore the Babylon Bee after they made a very brave stand and refused to take down a post about a man dressed as a woman in the federal government. And of course, there are many, many, many more. But they weren't all there from the beginning. Many of the people who did some of the best work on this topic, in part, felt the freedom to do so because we had taken big risks ahead of them. Still, others of them only even agreed with the concept of doing it because they read a book by Abigail Shrier, because they watched a movie by Matt Walsh, because they read an article by Luke Rosiak, because they saw a video of Ben Shapiro asking a college student why she wasn't 60, which is one of the biggest viral moments in the history of the company from the very earliest days of the Daily Wire. And the presence of those other great warriors in the fight doesn't change the fact that for a decade now, the Daily Wire has been leading on this issue more and more effectively than any other organization in American public life. And for that reason, every single one of you and everyone who has ever worked here in the past, and every subscriber and every former subscriber who subscribed to the Daily Wire sometime in the past, and everyone who listens and shares, and everyone who engages with our advertisers, and every advertiser who's ever advertised on our shows and stood beside us should feel some pride of ownership in this remarkable moment. We all deserve to recognize the role that we've played and to savor this enormous victory. It's easy to say of conservatives that for all our talk, we don't actually conserve anything. It's easy to say, but it's a lie. Our work matters. Our dedication to our principles matters. These battles aren't short, and victory is never guaranteed, but when we take great risks on behalf of what's right, sometimes God allows us to participate in some small way in world-changing events. The Daily Wire fights. This team fights. Our audience fights. And sometimes we win. There are a lot of people who don't like the Daily Wire. That comes with the territory, and it's fine. But we take great risks, and we have been a part of great victories. If you're employed in this country today and you're unvaccinated, you should know that the Daily Wire, alongside a small handful of other companies, made that possible by daring to take on the federal government. If you think, sure, that's just what you do for a living, I would encourage you to pick a fight with people who can audit you and regulate you, and who can and do regulate and threaten the people on whose platforms we conduct almost 100% of our business. And if your child or grandchild should struggle, as millions of children do, with questions about their identity and how to feel comfortable in their own skin, you should know that the Daily Wire, along with a handful of other allies, played a pivotal role in helping to make sure that your government can't prey on them in their weakest moments and then castrate them while they're still too young to drive. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of the Daily Wire, as I said. And that means 10 years of fighting this particular fight. Through every one of those battles, God has blessed us. Even with all the risks and all of the challenges, and even after all of the defeats, we've managed to grow in size. We've managed to grow in strength. We've managed to grow in revenue and in reach. We're bigger today than we've ever been, and we're fighting harder for our values than we have ever fought. Over the coming months, we'll do a lot to mark this enormous milestone, 10 years of the Daily Wire. And I look forward to getting back together and raising a glass to that unbelievable moment and sharing also with you in the audience some of the fun ways that we're going to celebrate between now and September 21st, which, according to some arguments, is actually the first day because it's the first day of the Ben Shapiro show. There's an argument for July, which is the first day we started paying Ben Shapiro. And there's an argument for October, which is when we launched the website. But I think September 21st is the appropriate day because it's the first day that we appeared on the public scene. But reading the news yesterday, couldn't help but think that today and this enormous victory is just an excellent way to kick off the festivities. So, to everyone in this room and to those who've been with us on this journey through this last decade, fighting these battles and other battles that are yet to be won, you have my deepest thanks. We did it together. Savor it. Thank God for it. Thank one another for it. Thank all the warriors who've taken the field to defend our children. Thank Donald Trump for winning his re-election, which is the number one job of a politician, is to win, and for having the courage in his victory to do things that other Republican presidents have lacked the courage of their convictions to actually take on. And then let it go. Because the only way to thrive in this world is to hold lightly to those victories and to move on to the next challenge and win yet again. Thank you.
President Trump issued a historic executive order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. This is a giant victory for the right and a complete reversal of the trend of social leftism from where it was even 5 years ago.
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
What is a woman? What is a woman?
What is a woman? Can you tell me that?
Controversy continues to spread.
Why aren't you 60? You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
We're not supposed to discuss the genetics right now.
Well, no,
what
no.
are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
There's never been anything funnier or more mockable in the mainstream part of our culture than letting grown-ass dudes beat up women.
I penned an irritated tweet. I've essentially been banned from Twitter.
We're really proud to be teaming with Charlie and Turning Point on a new documentary. It's called Identity Crisis.
Johnny the Walrus is the #1 bestseller on Amazon's LGBTQ+ book list.
When Hershey's celebrated women with a man, Jeremy launched Jeremy's Chocolate.
He's a biological man appropriating womanhood.
You are all child abusers.
We helped elect a governor in Virginia after Luke Rosiak's remarkable reporting from Loudoun County.
Harry's Razors seems to have a big
They
issue.
dropped their ads from our network because of what they called values misalignment.
Conservative media has never been more important than it's been over the past several years.
The wins are coming in so fast.
And that is happening largely thanks to our Daily Wire Plus members. Without them, none of this is possible.